With the Justice Department launching a probe, Republican Senator Kelly Loeffler has admitted to millions more in stock sales after coronavirus briefings, including ditching shares in retailers and buying stock in a company that makes protective equipment. This proves that the only thing less popular than a global pandemic is politicians.
Queer Eye star Jonathan Van Ness says you shouldn't cut your hair while isolating at home. He's right. Instead, you should just pull it out while listening to Trump talk.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has finally given in after weeks of mounting pressure and has issued a statewide stay-at-home order, which just goes to show you that everyone in the state of Florida does things much slower with their left turn blinker on the whole time.
Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin says Americans can expect their stimulus money within 3 weeks, which means Americans can expect their stimulus money within 10 weeks.
And finally, Joe Biden is saying states should prepare for the possibility of voting remotely in November's presidential election, which is to say that he's taking time right now, starting for about 7 months, so he can figure out how to vote in November's election. The Trump Report starts now.
I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Oh, look at us. Here we are, socially distant, and what could be happier than hunkered down for a
we all wave, and there's no telling if you can do that or not.
No, it's a Wednesday afternoon, and this is just going to be a light, fun conversation. I'm Christian Bladt, joined by Chelsea Galicia.
Hello.
And Scott Moore.
Hello, everyone.
Apparently what I said about people from Florida is true. There's a little bit of a lag between us and Scott. And of course, Tamra Brown, welcome to the Trump Report. That's right, except no substitutes. So there's, I guess, lots more numbers flying around, and we're right. Since our last show, the expectation is that, the last time we were on, the idea of churches being full in time for Easter, that seemed to be what the president was aspirational towards. And that has now been backburnered. They're saying the end of April. I just feel like, I'm sure that this is being done incrementally for a reason. I think they should just tell us that, like, we're not going outside until July 1st, or later. But I feel like, that's probably the earliest. I will ask you first, Chelsea, what you think about sort of this moving deadline. Do you think that people could handle being told that it wouldn't be until July or October? Just horrified me to say out loud. What do you think?
I actually don't. And especially in the world where there are some people, Trump included, who believe that we should get back to opening the economy yesterday, the idea of us having to be hunkered down for not just weeks, but months and months can be pretty overwhelming. I've made it easier, got myself a puppy and some games like Roomy. Anybody know this one? So I'm going to just figure out board games and puppy tricks and keep doing the show through online, and I'll be good. I know that it's gonna shatter some people's worlds, and I think it will end up being a good thing. But it's hard, I think, for people to face the sort of the falling away of their identity, especially for people who identify by their roles, by their jobs, by their careers. And if you're not that for a few months, who are you? And I think it's a wonderful existential question, hopefully not crisis for people, that they, have to entertain, because it's just you, your family, and your thoughts. So I can see why people wouldn't want to say, hey, this is going to be the deal for another few months. But I think you're right that it is.
Yeah, I think it might be wonderful as an existential journey, if you will, for people who aren't trapped in a house with small children or large children. They're even worse, from what I can tell. So, in terms of what our identity is, a lot of us, it's sort of like essentially babysitter, but also combination one-room school teacher, combination prison warden, combination chef
Imagine how
Boyardee.
much more appreciation we're going to have for each of these roles in our society when we all have to try them on for months and months. How much more respect do you think we'll have for babysitters, teachers, prison wardens?
Wow,
Think
prison warden's getting to be an easier job. They're just letting everybody go.
okay,
Scott,
Fox News, they're not letting everyone go, but okay.
Hey, Tekashi 6ix9ine is going to get out, so clearly they're letting everyone go. What do you think about all this, Scott? Are you here? Are you ready to just hunker down till Christmas?
No, as someone who also misses just being out in society, and I have a birthday coming up at the end of the month, and I wanted to do a big party, a big event, and be thinking, okay, now that's not going to happen. It's definitely a learning curve, and I think there's two things about it. I agree with what Chelsea said in the sense that they don't want to tell people it's going to be months, and people are freaking out. But on the other side, I also don't think they have a clear idea either, and so part of it's incremental. As they continue to get more numbers in, as people continue to get tested, they have a better idea of the actual scope of what's actually happening. And that's why you're also seeing these incremental pushes on these deadlines as they start to see. Even Trump realized, okay, Easter is just definitely out of the question. So I think that's another reason why they ended up also not wanting to give a far off deadline too, because things could change.
Yeah, and Scott, with your birthday coming up, I'm going to bet that your birthday party is going to look a lot like the screen you're looking at right now, where you see, the four of us split. I think you'll have a lot more smaller boxes like that. Tamra, what are your thoughts on sort of the narrative,
State
which
of affairs
is?
I think.
Go ahead.
It's always been a pet peeve of mine for almost as long as I can remember, when people who thrive on letting you know how busy they are, they're like, oh, hey, how's it going? Oh gosh, I just can't. Oh, I was, and we are a society that values you are more important the busier you are. And so that's why a lot of people thrive on that. And this sort of like what Chelsea was saying, like this is a time in history where we are forced to not be busy. And I'm sure that's just driving some people absolutely insane. But I'm really enjoying, I've been like sending some writing samples to friends who were checking over each other's, giving notes and things like that. And I'll send things to people and just be like, send this back to me by tomorrow. I know that you have nothing else to do. Like I'm relishing in how like nobody's able to give the like, sorry, I'll take a look at this when I get a chance. I'm like, don't give me that. You have a chance right now.
Yeah, my wife and I were talking about this earlier. We did an online game night last week with a few different, a group of friends, and it was fun and it was fine. And then they wanted to do it again this Friday, and we're like, we just did it. But then it's like, what are you going to say you're doing? It's like, they know you can do it. So it's like answering a call from a telemarketer. Once you do it, they know they've got you.
And the same thing that reminds me of, I've really been enjoying people's like Instagram lives, but the thing about that is sometimes you click on an Instagram live and you're the only one there, and it just feels like
like basically
hi.
Yeah. It's like, well, now you can't click out because they're like, finally someone's here.
Yes.
So yeah, look, these are some of the micro problems that we're seeing. And I think that for every time you see a story where it's like, okay, people seem to be coming around to how important this is, then you'll see another story about state police in New Jersey actually made arrests because somebody decided to have an engagement party over the weekend. There were like at least 50 people there. And, so you hear that. And then depending on who you follow on social media, you might be aware that this idea of telling churches they can't be open, and, churches is a general term for all houses of worship, but the people that
Church's Chicken.
Yeah, and Church's Chicken is still open last I checked, but you know what? It's been a few days and I'm not sure. So we might need some kind of declaration from the federal government to keep churches chicken open. But in any case, the just this idea of like, well, we can't we can't go to church, we can't assemble, and it's like, well, there's other ways to do it. I mean, I feel like that's why. Look, all I know is early in the morning church is on TV on Sunday. It's ever since I was a kid, because I was always like, well, but where's what I want to see? Where's the cartoons? So I think there's ways around that, but then it's problematic when you see the governor of Texas issue an order that supersedes smaller regional, mayors and things, saying like, yeah, churches can't be open. And then he says, no, churches can be open. I'm going to trust everybody that it's going to be done respectfully. And yet we had reports, not just from Texas, but over the weekend, of, just huge turnouts at churches with no kind of distance at all. So, Scott, as somebody that's, and I know that Florida is a very diverse state, but it's the southernmost state any of us are from. So what do you think that is about the fabric of people? And I understand that religion is very important for people, but the importance of not being told you actually can't go, you're going to have to figure out how to Zoom with your pastor.
Yeah, I think like what you're saying is that it's such a big part of the cultural fabric in Florida in many places, especially in the South. And at this time of year, with Easter coming up, and these are some of the biggest holiday of the entire Christian calendar. And I believe even Governor DeSantis's stay-at-home order did not include churches at this point. Like, as from what I had read earlier today, I mean, he just finally issued it today, which kind of leads to us with why we think this is going to be lasting for months rather than weeks, because some states are just now implementing their stay-at-home orders, and so it's just going to take a long time to see these numbers of new cases start to stabilize. But yeah, I think for a lot of people, that's such an ingrained part of their life, and exempting churches, I mean, just the same thing, we exempt churches from taxes and everything, and maybe there should be discussion about that. But
oh yes, there should be.
But in the sense that I do think that it definitely is something that a lot of government officials are wary to suggest that outright. Because again, let's go back to politicians just not wanting to do anything that's going to be risky or alienate any of their constituents in any way. And so if they were saying you can't go to church, I think that would make a lot of constituents feel very much like, oh, the government, trying to control us and tell us what to do. Whereas if they make it more of a general, like, oh, we really, we'll leave it up to individual places of worship to make those determinations, kind of throws it back on them, but also makes it a little bit easier for a lot of like limited government people to feel better about that than saying out.
Yes, I blame Ronald Reagan for this.
So you said you blame Ronald Reagan.
Like we talked about last week.
Yeah, I mean, when he's the one saying government is not the solution, government is the problem. And then now you have people who are just very sort of bitter and resistant to our political leaders, rather than saying there are problems in government mostly with the way that politicians are elected. But if we clean that up, and these people are actually a representation of us, we believe in them, we trust them, then I think that a governor can say, yeah, guys, we need to hunker down. I know this sucks, but they would have faith in that the people trusted them, the people elected them. They wouldn't have to be worried about some special interests that are trying to, oh, don't do that because it's going to be bad for business. No, that they could say what's good and correct, and not have to think so politically about it, and just say and do the right thing. But when you make people distrustful of government, instead of saying the politicians are not the problem so long as they're elected fairly and democratically. And I think that's one of the reasons why that we're having people be so resistant to government. I mean, I think that's, for the rise of libertarianism, but that's a whole nother topic too. But can you imagine if all of us were more involved in the democratic process and actually, liked or respected the person on TV who's saying, you got to stay home. And then we'd say, okay, and it wouldn't be this big thing. But because of what, I'm sorry to say, I hate to blame just one party, but because of what Republicans have done to the democracy in the last 40 or so years, and the biggest name that stands out to me is Reagan, who I believe really got this ball rolling in the direction of you should all, hate government, really. I think is why
Or
we're in the
just not
situation that
trust
we're in.
government.
Exactly.
Yeah, what I was going to ask you, Tamara, to the point that Chelsea made, sometimes government is the problem and is also the solution, which to some extent seems to be what we're going on right now. What do you think about all this, Tamara?
Well, I've been thinking about buying a tiger, and so I just need to make sure that there's no laws preventing me from owning a tiger.
I have some places where you should not buy them from.
Okay.
I just recommend.
If you can send me, just email me after we're done your list of tiger contacts.
Oh, the good tiger places. Yeah,
Yeah.
we got. Yeah, Tigers R Us is probably where I would say go.
So, what was the original question?
Well, I mean, the tiger is obviously the important thing. No, just sort of this idea of government in our lives, and even at a time where we literally need government now to help save all of our lives, people still were like, whoa. And look, it makes sense that out of any state to really try and buck this trend, it would be Texas. I mean, you do have other states that don't have as stringent policies, but this is the governor of Texas actually taking time to be like, yeah, the churches aren't closed. It's all right. It's fine. Just don't sit too close together.
I'm sorry, I still don't know what you're asking.
Okay.
Wait.
It's what you think about the fact that so many people. Anyway, Chelsea, I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you about. Apparently, the Democratic Party is on agreeing with Joe Biden that the convention, which is scheduled for Milwaukee in July, can't go on as it was expected.
Who's Joe Biden? I don't even know who you're talking. Yeah, I don't even know who you're talking about.
He's a guy who had a couple of really bad interviews.
I mean, the fact that he and his campaign have not figured out a way for him to be very relevant right now is just destroying him. Who cares about this convention at this point?
Well, no, because it circles back to it. But the idea of not having it because it's in July is, if people are, the numbers are all, this curve is flattened by July and everybody seems to be doing better. It seems like, well, that's a great way to, reinfect a lot of people in Milwaukee and then bring it to other places. So it does sort of talk about this entire electoral process, because you have the two conventions and then you have people actually standing in line to vote in November. So as you look at that, what do you think makes the most sense to do? What do you think about this idea of contingency plans, even though it's already April 1st and, the election is not for 7 months? But what do you think about sort of all of that?
I think we should fix the mail-in ballot system and just mail it in.
You don't want to do an app like the Iowa caucus? You didn't think that that would be a good idea to do an app? I mean,
idea is great. The reality hasn't turned out to be so great. I think mail in, unless we could zoom in our ballots or something, like, I don't know, we just stand here.
But then it's not anonymous, so there's something to be said for that. But yeah, I mean, if.
Gosh, should voting be anonymous? Is anonymous voting really the most important part of voting?
Oh,
anyway,
sure. Well, I mean, it has to be, because a lot of people wouldn't vote if it wasn't.
Yeah, that's true. I think turnout would be less if you had to look, regardless of how you want people.
But what if it wasn't a public? What if it's like you Christian are the recorder's office for your county, and we all just had to.
I'd put that all on Instagram. I would. It would be like, I don't like the way that these people voted. I want you to know how they voted.
All right. So, I mean, really, the solution is just mail in, and any resistance to it, I think, is just silly. And hoping that things will get back online or back offline before long is just silly.
Yeah.
I think mail in should be easy for everybody.
Well, Tamra, considering the concerns and the lingering feelings about 4 years ago, I don't know. I feel like our voting is safer if we just do it through the mail. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure if like mail-in ballots would that encourage more people to participate? I suppose it would.
As long as people don't have to pay for the postage, which they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And since when I my technical error I had just a minute ago, which by the way, for some reason dialed 911 while I got out of Zoom.
Jeez.
Yeah, but Zoom, get over yourself. It wasn't an emergency. So I don't know what I missed, but I think did I see a quote that Trump recently said that he said that if every single person who wanted to vote was able to vote, yes, we wouldn't have an elected Republican.
Correct. Yes, that is a real life.
Yeah,
quote.
the quote was that you should have seen the things in. This isn't a direct quote, but the summary of the quote, I don't want to pretend that I have it word for word, is you should have seen the things that are in there. If this passed, a Republican would never be elected again. Yes.
Referring to the stimulus bill.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that's you're essentially correct in what
I think the problem is not mail-in ballots versus I don't think it's so much the method of the voting. I think it's the gerrymandering and the things like that, which is the problem with voting. I don't know. I don't see the method for which you cast your ballot being the biggest hurdle to accurate voting.
Go ahead, Scott.
I do think that turnout has been an issue, and especially like you're saying, Tamara, with gerrymandering and everything. But when you make it more difficult for people to vote, whether it's voting locations where they physically have to go, and certain states that are not really open still at this point to allowing mail-in ballots, that's where you start to have an issue beyond the gerrymandering, because you are making it more difficult to vote. And I do think if there is a mail-in ballot option that people can sit in the comfort of their home and go through everything on the time that they want and drop it off in the mail, would definitely make it a lot easier. Especially, I'm sure people will still be, not feeling good about going out in public spaces even in the fall at this point, especially if there is any kind of recurrence, if this becomes a seasonal type virus. People will not feel good even if the numbers are low to go back out. And I think that's going to be a slow thing to happen again. So if you can make it as easy as possible, then it would help people really bring up the turnout. And for a lot of Democrats, it's been an issue is actually getting the turnout to vote. So, make it easier for people to be able to do that. Don't restrict voting hours. Don't restrict locations of where people can vote. And in the sense that Donald Trump quote would be accurate is if they made it easier to vote for everyone, Democrats would win by a lot more numbers, because there still are more Democrats. I mean, case in point, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote in 2016. There are more Democrats in places. We see that in the Senate races and the House races, how much more difficult it is for Democrats to win a majority compared to Republicans, the way the population is set up in the gerrymandering and other things, and the restricting of voting that a lot of these states have done. So, mail-in ballots would make a big difference, and it should be an option anyways, and normally, not just in a situation.
Yeah, I think that there could potentially be drawbacks to mail-in, and I think that for whatever reason, you can offer some form of in-person option, but do it sort of like the way that our primaries were in California, where it was like, I don't know, we had a couple weeks where we could go, And look, I know that I think it's probably seen as somewhat of a bipartisan issue that the more opportunities you give people to vote, the tougher it is to kind of, keep in power the people that have been there for far too long. But I did want to sort of on this same topic, Chelsea, you did bring up Joe Biden. I do think it's a very tough time to really be out there. I mean, look, he's doing interviews, he's doing what he can, but you can't campaign the way you normally would.
No, and that's a good thing.
Well, yeah, but then there's also just this notion. I mean, Bernie's getting direct questions of like, why are you still in this thing? But it's almost like, is there even a this thing to still be in? I wanted to ask you first, Tamra, what do you think sort of about the way Biden's handling it, about the fact that, Bernie doesn't see the need to go anywhere at this point? Well, none of us are going anywhere, but you know what I mean, to stay in the race.
I mean, I know that there are Bernie supporters who are claiming that he's still has a very much a chance to make a comeback or something like that. But I don't know if I necessarily believe that. But if there were ever a reason for him to, I think it's this that's currently happening, because Bernie's active. Joe Biden, because he does not currently hold a public office, he's not doing anything. All he can do is just sort of, I don't know, say something publicly, but Bernie is actually seen in action on the Senate floor and doing things like that, which just it just makes a stronger case for Bernie, in my opinion.
Because he's out there and he can actually be seen doing things. Yeah, and look,
if,
I mean,
if I were a person that was like,
sure.
No,
and
wait,
look,
keep going back and forth between the two, this would be a time where I would lean more towards Bernie.
Scott, I think that the distribution of the remaining delegates is impossible to predict at this point, because whenever primaries are held, who's going to vote, how many people are actually going to vote, and all that, and they could literally vote for anything. I wonder if there's any candidates that are like, oh man, why did I get out when I did? Why did I step up to support Joe? Mayor Pete's like, oh man, I could have hung in there a little bit longer. What do you think about all of this, Scott?
Well, there's two sides to it, and I agree a little bit with Tamara and with Chelsea here. It's like Biden isn't the best situation right now, so it's probably better that he doesn't have this soapbox to be able to be out there. But it's a very fine line for anybody. Even the best campaigner would have a difficulty, because, like Tamara was saying, Biden holds no position right now. He has no power, and he walks a very fine line too, of saying like, "Oh, what would I be doing if I were in power?" Versus trying to politicize this moment. And likewise, you have someone like Donald Trump, who's now turning these press conferences into a hour, 90-minute everyday variety show, where the incumbent just has a lot of power with the bully pulpit of the office and the presidency, and be able to, trot out with these press conferences and these ridiculous over the top things every day now. That gives him a lot of leverage as an incumbent, and that's, in general, it's very hard to bring down an incumbent in most of the time, because they have the power of the presidency to be able to blur that line between campaigning versus doing the everyday job of office of the president. And we've seen that with some of the uptick in his approval ratings, even from some Democrats and non-voters and independents, because he's out there every day. So it's a very difficult thing, even for Bernie, to be able to find that right line there that doesn't politicize the moment, but still be able to continue to get your message out there. And so that's a challenge. I don't think it would have helped to have anybody else stay in the race at this point that already had left, because it's at this point a too far gone conclusion. I mean,
yeah, and Chelsea, I'll get your thoughts on this in a second. I think that we're all best, we as a society are better served by some of the people getting out who did. I just think that they're all starting to think like, oh, maybe there was a chance. So Chelsea, what are your thoughts sort of on all of what we're talking about right now?
I think that the definition sort of a campaign, or the method of a campaign, goes from, here are my ideas on what I would do, to this is what I'm doing right now. And the thing that's most important right now for people is information, both information about what we're going through, but also information about how do we best deal with it. And we need somebody to stand up for ourselves, stand up for us. For example, this is April 1st, not only April Fool's Day, but it's the day that rent is due. What would it cost Biden to come out and say, today's the day that rent is due, but we're asking landlords across the country to delay requesting for rent or allow everybody to not pay rent? And if you are still paying a mortgage on your building, then please utilize X, Y, and Z resource to hold you until, for a few months, in terms of utilities, getting out there and talking to people and saying, how can we prevent utility companies from shutting people, off? Be out there doing something for the people that you want to represent. And so this is not about what I would be doing. This, like, go out and actually do something. I flipping through Twitter earlier, I saw that AOC is going to have I don't know if it's is going to go live and explain to New Yorkers how to file for unemployment. Like, that is really helpful for a lot of people. Just be out there doing something. Put yourself in the minds and the shoes of the constituents that you want to represent, and say, what is it that these people need right now? And how can I be their advocate to help them get that? That would be the best campaign. Not interviews, not Trump is an idiot and he should be doing this. Instead of doing that, he can have his own, daily briefings with his own, coronavirus task force that, would be saying hopefully something similar, or if they're saying something, but he can also be informing people in a way that's really helpful right now. And I think a lot of people are looking to him to do that, and he's not. So, I mean,
go ahead.
What if he was the one hosting? It would be great. Do you remember pop-up video back in, I don't know when MTV did the videos?
Yeah, they had VH1 with a little
VH1.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you for the correction. VH1, yeah. And it was like, the pop-up bubbles that would.
I think I suggested this on the show.
Right, and we could do that sort of if a Trump presser was sort of delayed by a few minutes, you replay it with the pop-ups. And so when he says that the population of South Korea is 38 million, you would have a bubble that pops up and say, no, moron, it's 9 million or 10 million. What's 38 is their elevation.
You actually don't even need to editorialize. You don't even need to say, you just be like, actually, that's what it is. I don't want to run out of time. So we're talking about the briefings. So CNN, I believe yesterday was the first day that they did it. They've decided, and I don't know if they're going to do it every day, but I know they did it yesterday. They didn't cut away from their programming to the briefing until after Trump spoke. And I understand the argument in favor of that, but I also feel like I don't know. I feel like I don't know. I feel like they shouldn't be making that decision. Like, well, yes, this guy's the president. Yes, we don't know about what he's saying, but this is still the president trying to talk us through a crisis. So in a relatively short answer, I want each of you to go around and tell us what you think about that. You first, Tamra.
Should CNN not give full coverage
the
to
idea
the press conference?
of like skipping the part with Trump and waiting for Fauci and
it's so difficult. Yeah, because you should say, stick to the people who are the factual, knowledgeable, where I want my audience to get the most information, so I'm going to only highlight the people who are giving them that information. But to do so, that would be, you can't do that. You can't not show the president. It's a stuck between a rock and a hard place,
Yeah, I mean, I think that you can make the case for why to make that decision, but I feel like that's sort of on you and maybe you do put facts at the bottom of the screen, sort of like, here's an actual bit of information. But I don't know. I find it troubling to just the idea of like, well, we're not going to, in a time like this, we're going to decide that we don't want to air what the president has to say. But what do you think, Scott?
I say we use what Chelsea says, do a third video and do the actual facts. But I didn't have as much of a problem with them not going to Trump, because the fact of the matter is he has been disrespectful to them and lies and isn't telling the truth. So in my opinion, I'd be like, great, you have no reason to show him. If he's not going to do a good job comforting Americans and telling the facts and being honest, then wait to go till you get to the real people and honest people. So I tend to disagree with that. They should do it, Chelsea's point, do a 30-second delay and do a pop-up video.
Yeah, and Chelsea, obviously
show every day, but it's 90 minutes now.
Yeah. I mean, but look, also from a television standpoint, ultimately, when people find out that that's what's happening, they're going to be just less likely to put CNN on for that. But what were you going to say, Chelsea?
I was going to say that then it just encourages people to go over to Fox News, which, I found myself doing. And I actually try and listen to Fox News for as long as I can to try and understand their angle, their spin, where actually I agree with them. And I can see a lot of parts where I do agree with them, but then I always have to stay sharp because I can see how they very subtly and very quickly manipulate things and throw things in and flip something around or conveniently leave something. And so you've got to, it's very interesting watching Fox News. It feels like the news is easier to digest actually when I'm watching Fox News, but then you're like relaxed. And then some of those things that they do can whiz by you real fast. And you kind of got to be on your game to be able to catch it and sort of not fall for the spell. I can see why Fox News has been so effective in getting people to believe things.
Chelsea, what's the longest span of time you've been able to like stay on Fox News?
It's actually been like up to an hour now. I feel like it's like I'm training for a marathon and it's like a little bit more every day.
So in an hour's time span, Chelsea, who we all know, says that there are certain times where she could slip and not catch. So imagine these people that are watching it all day long.
Yeah.
It's just, it's really literal mind manipulation.
That it is. And I can also see more and more where the CNNs and MSNBCs are doing it too. And I just, whatever one side accuses the other of doing, it itself is doing it. And so you've
Right.
got to look at both, and then you've got to also use common sense, and you've got to use Google to see what. It is not easy to watch the news. Actually, it's a very involved, engaged process.
And Ryan in the booth, I know we want to wrap. I just want to take literally 2 minutes because I want to know what each of you think, and keep in mind, keep your answer to about 30 seconds. There's this sexual allegation against Joe Biden, and I'm sort of wondering why each of you think it's not getting covered as much. Obviously, the number one story should certainly be coronavirus, but why do you think we're not hearing more about it? I mean, it's out there. You are hearing about it, but not to the extent that you think you might, especially if this wasn't going on. Tamra.
Well, even Fox News, you would think that Fox News would be all over it, but they're not even covering it that much. And I've heard people say that they think that the reason that Fox News isn't covering it is because they still don't see Joe Biden as big of a threat as another candidate would have been. But I can only guess that the bias of the media is generally in favor of Biden, and that's why they're not showing it. If not that, I really don't know.
I don't think you're wrong. What do you think, Scott?
I just think because the coronavirus coverage is so much bigger right now, and I will not put it past the media to be focused on it when we get back to normal campaigning, because like I said, and I've been saying, this will be an uglier campaign than 2016. And
there's something to be
thrown out.
Yeah, there's something to be said for the idea of spending the time on it now when people wouldn't be as focused on it. I can see that. And last word on this, and last word for the show. Chelsea, what do you think?
I think the ones who would be focusing on it, like the Fox News, don't want to focus on it so much because I see, have always downplayed allegations by women of wrongdoing, in terms of, men misbehaving sexually. So it's just, I think, in their playbook to not really make a big deal about it. Don't really believe women, don't really think it's important, even if they are right. Like, that doesn't have anything to do with how they're going to govern. So it's just not in their MO to really give it much airtime.
Well, something to obviously be said. We can certainly talk more about it, whether it's in the news or not. It's still something to spend some time on next week. But we went a little over, so that is our time for this week. Obviously, we want everybody to stay safe out there and stay inside and watch all of your favorite AfterBuzz TV shows like this one. But if you'd like to interact with all of us, Chelsea, where can people find you?
At Chelsea Galicia.
Scott Moore.
At
S-Man 80. Yeah, sman80. And Tamra Brown, where can people find you?
Instagram at Hey Tamra on Instagram.
And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ, and Thursdays at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern over on the Popcorn Talk for Marvel movie news, which is a little bit more lighthearted than this. That's all the time we have. And to quote the great Jerry Springer, take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Our founder, Keven Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.